Today's podcast is called Turning Point, and I have a very, very special guest on today, and I wanted to bring her on because of this topic. I have my oldest daughter, Haley Graves, on here. Hi, Haley.
Hello.
So we are on day 85, and we're on March the 26th. And today's morning rinse is Ezekiel 31 through 33. And the moment that you guys start to read this, whether it's audible or with your printed copy of your Bible, you're going to notice a shift in the tonality of Ezekiel. And so go ahead and pause this and read Ezekiel 31 through 33, and then come on back and we're going to talk with my very special guest, Haley. So there's actually two featured verses today, and it's Ezekiel 33, 10 and 11. Now, as for you, son of man, say to the house of Israel, thus you have spoken, saying, surely our transgressions and our sins are upon us, and we are rotting away in them. How then can we survive? Say to them, as I live, declares the Lord God, I take no pleasure in the death of the wicked, but rather that the wicked turn from his way and live. Turn back from your evil ways. Why then will you die, O house of Israel? So today's featured verses appear to be almost like this turning point in the book of Ezekiel. And so up until now, Ezekiel's sermons and his prophecies, they seemed to be hitting deaf ears, and he has been very bold. I mean, they didn't like what he had to say. They didn't like how he said it. And the people of Israel, they had not admitted, much less faced their sins and offenses towards God. But then, like, suddenly one day, their eyes were opened, and the heaviness of their sins began to bring the questions of how they could make it right. So Ezekiel then answered them and reminded them that God is a forgiving God, and he assured them that God takes no pleasure in seeing anyone die, even the wicked at heart. And instead, he wants to see a change of heart, a turning point from rebellious ways or sinful ways, and he really does see our potential. And so the reason why I brought Haley on today is because, Haley, you've had some turning points in your life. And I thought that, you've never really shared your testimony publicly that I am aware of. And, you do have some pretty great insight, and you have a testimony to share. And so I wanted to just bring you on because obviously the Israelites were not living for God. They were not wanting to hear the prophets, and they were blatantly disobedient. And yet there was a day of turning point. And so I wanted you to come on here and just share whatever you're comfortable with sharing, and we can talk about your journey wherever you want it to go. And hopefully your story will impact and encourage other people. So, maybe share where you felt like you were really starting to struggle, or maybe share some of your struggles that people might relate to, and kind of how you came about to your turning point and your turning points, because you've had several.
I've had many. I feel like there's still turning points to this day. But I've had lots of turning points. God is still ever present, and he's still turning my story around. I'm not perfect. I make mistakes. You heard a little bit from my husband a few days ago, and that's a huge part of our testimony as well. We started our family before we were married. We were living together, got pregnant out of wedlock 3 times, and it's just incredible to me how God can turn a story that looks like it is not something into something. And so I feel like that's just kind of my story in and of itself. I obviously grew up with you as my mother.
Yes.
You are my mother. And and I was very involved in church and youth group. I was on the worship team. I was in leadership. But I struggled like any other kid, and I wanted to do things how I wanted to do them. I wanted independence. I wanted to make my own choices. I wanted to have this air of freedom that I wasn't allotted. And so, a 13-year-old might not be allotted that freedom. And so, yeah, and I'm honestly, to be honest, I'm still like that a bit to this day. I don't like being told what to do. I don't like authority. I don't like being micromanaged. If you tell me not to do something, 90% of the time, I'm going to go try and do it and see if I can make it work, because I'm an optimist and I want to prove everybody wrong. Like, that's just inherently who I am. Like, and God's had to do a work in me and in that. And so, but I was in the church. I graduated from a Christian school. And after that, I felt called into ministry to some extent. And so I went to the Ramp in Alabama for about a year and a half, and I was in leadership there. I was on their dance team, and I was probably living as holy as you can say. I mean, I was immersed in it. I was in the scripture every day. I was in my prayer closet. I was living that life, and yet I still struggled. And, I came home that summer, and I think that was when I realized that, you can be as immersed in the Bible and in religion and still have gaps that the Lord has to fulfill. And so I think it's such a powerful way of viewing that, like, none of us are perfect, and we all need his grace every single day, in every moment, in every second, because none of us are too good for sin. Like, we all can sin. We all have that flaw. And I felt I had put myself on this pedestal that I'm at the Ramp and I'm in leadership and nothing can sway me, and I'm gonna come home and make a change. And and I had all these big dreams for my church, home church, and all these things, and yet I came home and struggled. And so I ended up going back to the Ramp and continued on that downward struggle. And I was only at the Ramp for probably another 6 months, and I ended up getting into an unhealthy relationship and moving away from the Ramp, and I moved to Mississippi and was living with him. And it was very abusive, physically, emotionally, mentally. That was probably the darkest I think I've found myself in life. And I was there for about a year and a half. And one day I remember it so clearly. One day I literally woke up and I was like, I'm not doing this anymore. So I called you, I called my dad, and I said, I want to come home. And this is not for me. And that's such a testament to like the power of God, and how he's so imminent in our lives, even when we're so far left. I was so far left, and yet he was still making changes, and he was still working in me, and he was planting good friendships in my life that, at the time wasn't recognizing that was all him. And so it's just such a testament to where we can be, where somebody would say you're so far gone, but within a moment, everything can change. And I came home and I started to get myself in a better place mentally and emotionally. And I had the incredible pleasure of starting a dance team at our home church and really being involved in that space. And it was such a blessing. And I look back at that time now and think wow, God used me for that. And I was not worthy. I was not worthy of it. I was not at all. And he used me for that. Such a dirty sinner. And I was able to be used by him in such an incredible way. And so shortly after that, I met my husband on Tinder, and which, online dating, it works, friends, it works. But yeah, so I met him on Tinder, and yeah, our story started, and our relationship started very fast. It started rooted in sin. We were both believed in God. We were both Christians, but we were not living the way that he would have called us to live. And so, we started our relationship like that. We moved in together and we struggled. We struggled a lot. And God has been writing our story in such incredible ways throughout it all. And, it's just a testament to like, nothing is ever too far gone. Nobody is ever too far gone. No story is too far gone. And everything is redeemable because he is the redeemer. Like, so that's just a little snippet into my road to get to where I am now.
Well, God does see our potential. And what's really cool is that he not only sees our individual potential, but he also sees all of the potential of the people that are around us and how we can impact them and what they, can become. And he also longs for us to see that same potential in those around us. And so I like what you were saying, how that it's, no person is unredeemable, basically, but we all have that potential. And I wonder all of the different turning points you've had. I mean, I know that you've had a whole lot more than what I know of and what I'll probably ever know. But, I remember that phone call when you called us and said you wanted to come home. And that was kind of that first point. But I also remember when you came home that summer and you're gung-ho and wanting to change. And, Mom, I really believe that I'm supposed to come home this summer for my family and really make an impact in the church. And that was my summer. And it like 2 weeks later, you were struggling. And it just is so true, the way that, when you said that we all are susceptible, we all could potentially make mistakes or fall into a wrong path. It's like none of us are shielded in the sense that, something might never, ever happen to us. We all have to do our part to make sure that we protect ourselves and our spirit and our hearts. And yet when there's somebody who's needing a turning point, seeing their potential is also very vital. And where you and Dre have come is so far.
We've come so far in the past 11 years from, our little baby selves at 22. Yeah, we've come so far. We were very blessed, and yeah, I came home that summer and I felt like I had proved myself. When you kind of get that feeling that like I've done enough for God's kingdom where I've proved myself that I can withstand. Like I can withstand. And I had gotten myself to that point where like I didn't think that the enemy could tempt me. I didn't think that I could fall because I had spoken in tongues so many times and I had been to so many prayer meetings and I had, gone through the ramps fire tunnel like I really thought that I was just all that in a bag of chips and God was blessed to use me. That's how I felt. Like he was blessed to have me on his side. And like my gosh, like what a reality check. What a reality. Like I am so unworthy of all of his grace and all of the forgiveness that he's bestowed on me. I'm so unworthy of any platform, honestly, and anywhere that he would put me is a blessing. And I can't do any of it without him. Like leading with that is where I should have been that summer, and where I should have been in my walk with Christ, because I'm not worthy. I'm just a sinner. I'm just me. I'm just a sinner and I'm nothing without his grace and without him.
It's so interesting how you described that, because when we think that God is so blessed to have us in,
in his corner. He's so blessed to have us in his corner.
Well, and that's called pride.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And pride will destroy us, faster than really anything else. And selfishness does too. I mean, when we think that we're all that in a bag of chips, we're in a sense, yes, prideful, but we're also selfish, because then we think that
it's about us.
It's about us. Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think that is truly the message in the Bible with it's about him and not us. And your story really does show God's grace and redemption. You were saved, I think, at the age of 6, I think. Or no, it was 3. 3. Saved at 3.
I don't even know how a 3-year-old understands that, but apparently I did.
Yes, I do. I love Jesus. How about you?
Well, and I think another pivotal point for me as well, because when we say that I got saved at 3, in my head, I'm like, does a 3-year-old even understand? Like, my son is about to be 3 tomorrow, and I'm like, does he even understand? I like, and so I think one thing that, and I've started to kind of think about this over the past few weeks, is throughout my story, and like I said, like I about 13 is when I started to kind of come into my own independence, I would say, and try to figure this thing out. And I think one thing that is so pivotal is that a lot of times as parents, and I'm realizing this with my kids too, is that I am bestowing my beliefs onto them, right? Like, I'm teaching them my beliefs, and I'm teaching them what I believe, the Bible is, and who I believe God is, and all these things that I'm teaching, because that's our job, right? Our job is to teach and to protect and all the things. And so when I got to that age and I started to really start to understand the Bible, I started to really be involved in youth ministry and prayer and worship team and all these things, I started trying to figure out what my faith was to me, not what my parents' faith is, but what is my faith and what do I believe to be true? Because if I'm not rooted in that, then I have nothing, basically. And so I think that was a huge part of it, was that I was living this faith because it's what my pastor said was right, and what my best friend said was right, and what my mom said was right, and what, my mentor said was right. But until I think I had actually stepped away from God, did I realize who God was to me, and not just what everybody else had said he was, but I actually had experienced him firsthand in that redemption and that grace, and that everybody had told me about. Like, everybody preaches this redemption and this mercy and this grace, and he's so loving and all this stuff, but until I had actually experienced that in my life, I didn't believe it, truly. You know what I mean? It's like I'm living in this subconscious faith, but until I had stepped away and he was still there, like literally by my side. He hadn't gone anywhere. He was still there in my mess and my yuck and my dirt, in my sin. He was still there. And until I had stepped away, I hadn't realized that. It took all of those years for me to like truly have the faith that I have now, as like, this is my faith and this is what I believe, because I've witnessed it for myself. I've witnessed it in my own life. And so, yeah.
I love all of your analogies and how there's this, I can't remember if it's a verse or a saying, but it's like those who have been forgiven much. What is that?
Something about forgiven much, do much, or something. I don't know. I know what you're talking about.
Yeah. And so sometimes those who have gone farther away from the faith can appreciate redemption even more, And we were talking about too, seeing the potential of other people. I mean, you probably remember when Dad and I were foster parents, and during that journey, we cared for a sibling set of 3, and we cared for them for a little more than 2.5 years or so. And when we were caring for these kids, we also mentored their parents. I don't know if you remember that or not, but we had them in our home. We sat down with them for hours. We ministered to them. We were hoping that they would rely on God's strength for new beginnings, kind of like that redemption. And our family tried our very best to, be a vessel to turn their lives around. However, they didn't have a family redemption story like what you had. It didn't end up that way. As we were hoping and praying that it would. And sometimes our messages of hope, the ones that you received or the ones that others receive, it's going to be vital for life change in other people. And sometimes our desire to help someone is going to just remain a seed until other people will grow that seed in their lives. And very curious, like you mentioned your friends who, when you were, when you were in Mississippi or, other locations, there would be a friend that God would put in your life. Somebody was watering the seeds that you had in your heart, and God was obviously nudging you no matter where you were at in your walk, and those friends are important, no matter what, our messages of hope should continue on even if people don't listen. But I think that even though we have moments where there are people in our lives that aren't listening or they don't appear to be listening, that doesn't give us the right to be silent, or that doesn't give us the right to quit speaking hope into their lives. Just like what you said earlier, there may be people that we might think are, not going to turn their lives around, but you are a prime example of being in a really, really, really dark place, and someone in your life watered your seeds enough to where that you had a turning point or had multiple turning points. I love your story and all the things that God's doing in your life and in Dre's life and your kids' life, I'm sure. Yeah. And I'm really grateful for all of the friends that were in your life that were there and didn't, leave you or just remained present. Maybe they didn't even know that they were being used of God. There could have been people in your life that didn't even know. And so how often are we used and we don't even know, that we're being used for all of that. So where are you at on your journey now?
Well, I'm living my best mothering life. That's where I'm at now. I'm mothering, and Dre and I are doing great. We're, doing the best we've ever done. And, we've just come a long way individually and together. And God's still writing our stories individually and together. He's still doing both. And so, we're just, yeah.
It's so awesome. Yeah, I loved bringing you on here and talking about it. And so as people are listening to you and listening to this devotion about turning points, as you know, there is a challenge every single day to dig deeper. And today's challenge is to really ask the audience, whoever is listening or watching this, to ask, is there anybody in your world that needs to hear your message of hope today? And could your story be exactly what they need to hear for a turning point in their life? And I think we all have people in our lives that need hope or that need our story. So regardless of how they respond, the challenge today is to be courageous and to share a message of hope with that person today and be willing to be a vessel to help them if they are ready for a turning point. And, we may be the person to plant that first seed. We may be the person to water a seed that's already in their hearts. We may be that person who is right there for them when they are needing help and they're at a crossroads in their lives and they need help in moving in the right direction, and that's their turning point. And so you never know what position we will be at in those, because I know for you, Haley, you've had people in each of those steps in your life, to help you and to guide you along the way. So it's really cool to hear how much growth you've had and what God's done and is doing in your life right now. And so if you're watching this or listening to it, you know that there is a journal. And once you complete that challenge, like really hone in, if there's somebody in your life that needs hope, needs your voice. And so pull out your journal and write down who heard your message today and write down how they responded. And you never know what life you're going to change when you are there and present and help somebody else with their turning point. And if you have a turning point, which I'm sure that everybody listening or watching will have a turning point, sharing that story is so vital and so helpful. And Haley, your story is going to be awesome. People are going to really be touched by your story.
Well, thanks for having me.
Yes, it was such a pleasure to have you, and such a fun thing. And it was very quick and spontaneous, but
it was.
But I'm grateful that you had it. And so I am, looking forward to finishing the book of Ezekiel. There's some really cool days left. We're almost done with the month of March. And by the way, if anybody is listening or watching this podcast, if you are and you made it this far, you're meeting the editor of the podcast.
Oh,
Haley,
stop.
Haley is the wind beneath my wings, the row to my boat.
Oh my God. Well, it's been so fun doing it with you and seeing how much we progressed from that first episode to now. These 3 months have been it's been a blast. And we've had challenges and we've had to overcome, and it's been a journey. So it's been fun.
It has been fun, and it's been a definite fun journey, but also, yes, I agree. There's been some challenges, and I've had to learn all about podcasting in like a week, it felt like. Yeah, so I'm so grateful that you came on and were a guest today, and it was so cool to hear your story. And I hope that you get lots of opportunities to continue to share your story and inspire people to not only have hope for other people, but realizing that they too can be used no matter what they've done in the past. And it's been really cool to hear it. So you know the drill. Until tomorrow.
Keep rinsing, reflecting, and repeating.
God bless you.